man. I almost said hello and welcome to Out of the Game's fourth podcast, where today, as always, we have Jeff Green.
Hi.
Luke Smith.
Good morning-ish.
And Guy Kroll.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Robert Ashley.
Hey.
Oh, God, and me. I'm
wow.
Robert, we're going to wake you up. We know you ate about, what was it, a quarter pound of weed, or was it a full pound of weed last night?
It was a couple of pounds, actually.
Wow.
I'm fighting my cancer.
We will
Don't
rail
you live
out.
in Berkeley?
Yeah,
Could've
man.
invited me, man.
Yeah.
I was home watching Buffy.
You're
All right.
not a Buffy person, are you? I didn't know that.
Well, I am
Don't
now.
don't become a Buffy person.
Well, I'm watching it with my daughter. Does that give me an excuse?
No.
I guess that's better than being like, watching it on your own. You could at least blame it on your wife or your daughter. That makes some sense.
Actually, I think Luke should talk about what he watched on his own last night.
I think we should.
I watched Monster Trucks and boxing.
Yeah, not really the story you told before we went on air, Luke.
Just
Tell us about it.
Man, the Hatton fight was great last night. A bunch of buddies and I got together.
The head fight was over in 2 rounds, though, and you spent the rest of the night watching a recently released movie, right?
Yeah. Tell us all about it, Luke.
I don't think that's necessary.
Oh, come on. Come on.
No way.
I wasn't
man.
around to hear this conversation. Were you watching like the episode of Sex and the City?
Are you really pussing out, Luke? Come on, this is like Jeff Green. He'll tell you that he's watched seasons of Gilmore Girls. That he was.
I watched 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls. Every episode.
Listen, sometimes on a Saturday night, a man needs to stay in and have what I call a woman night, where you sit around, do very little. I didn't get any ice cream. I don't like ice cream. I think it's disgusting. It's like the spawn of the earth. Sit in a nice, comfortable robe and enjoy Marley and Me, courtesy of the internet.
So how was?
Fucking love dogs, man. I can't wait to get one, but it's gonna be sad when it dies. I don't think humans can watch movies like that without crying. I just don't think they can.
Did you cry? Is what you're admitting?
Dogs dying, yeah, man, that's sad stuff. I cried harder when my own dog died than when my grandparents died. It was like a non-issue.
I'm down with that. I agree with that. Yeah.
Like I remember when Jeff Green had was it a cat recently pass away?
It was my cat.
Yeah,
it was my cat. Yeah.
I was touched by that blog post. People
that
and pets.
Was last November.
Ah.
That was the only time that my daughter's actually ever seen me cry in 15 years.
Is that a point? That's like, I detect a point of pride in there. You want to be the sensitive dad, but you can flip it and be like, I only cried once.
I think I think that when dads cry, that's when you know like shit got real. Like,
yeah, she was really freaked out by it.
Yeah,
Not
with
freaked
my
out,
dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, the 2 or 3 times I've seen him cry, I'm like, wow, that's like legit.
Yeah,
he's not watching Marley and
We're getting heavy duty, man. We were trying to go light with Marley and Me, and now you spoiled it for one. So there's going to be someone out there like, dude, fucking Marley dies.
No. Actually, that's the first thing I thought. Well, there goes that rental. Way to go, Luke.
Now we're talking about the top 2 times your dad cried, and there's only 2 of them, so it's about just a matter of organizing which one was the first one.
So Jeff, was it like heaving sobs, or was it like a single Denzel man tear, like in Glory, or like?
Oh man, I lost it because we'd had this dog for 16 years, so it was longer than my kid was alive.
I thought it was a cat.
And what did I say, dog? Did I say dog?
Yeah.
No wonder I was so sad. That was the weirdest dog I have ever had, and now he's dead. No, it was a cat. Sorry. I have a dog now. I guess that's why I'm confused. But yeah, no, I was full on sobbing because it was very sudden, and it was a hardcore fall for this cat, and it was fucking Thanksgiving morning too. So,
oh man,
yeah.
Bummer.
Sorry to hear.
Let's change this. I'm gonna cry on this podcast.
I think this should be the dead pets episode. Like we should just talk about all of our dead pets.
If you want, we could do that. We could throw everything, all the intense planning that we've been doing for 2 weeks straight, out the window, so we can talk about dead fucking pets. Go ahead, Robert. Why don't you stop?
No. I don't have anything to say.
I can tell you that my dog that I grew up with, I got when I was 6 years old. It died when I was 21, and I'm now in my mid 40s, and I still dream about that dog. Like, hey, he's actually still alive. That kind of thing.
Wow. What a cruel dream.
I know. Wow,
Bullshit.
this podcast is... Fuck it, let's just stop recording now. I'm just gonna...
Okay, let's get it back on track then, and we'll go come back to the dogs.
It's all Luke's.
Some of us, I think 3 of us have either started reading or read Jonah Lehrer's most recently published book, How We Decide, and we could bring that into games and stuff. So I figured we can start short on that, and then just kick it around Robin and see about who else's dogs died, cats. Whatever else we want to talk about.
Well, Sean, you were the one who recommended that we read the book. How did you come across it, and why do you think it would be a good candidate for, I guess, the first ever Out of the Game book club?
So I was watching I read Lehrer's last book, Proust Was a Neuroscientist, and I think it might have been the last time I was on the One Up Yours. I talked about it there in the context of reading it. It was just put together really well, and it was basically taking different works of art. Some cases, might be culinary, might be novel, might be painting, and then applying sort of discoveries and advances in neuroscience in the past decade and applying them to them and seeing how, in which cases they might have been right, and which even without having any ability to conduct any experiment or know these conclusions outside of an intuitive way, they were remarkably spot on a number of things. And I looked at that when I read that book. I was like, God, I really want to read writing about games in the same capacity. And I'm just a sucker for anything that has to do with cognition. So when I saw that his next book was called How We Decide, and I was pretty much like ready to buy it when it came out. For me, the book is good. I've read a number of books that have to do with the same subject matter, and so for me, Lehrer's book is not a matter of like, everything's blowing my mind. I had no idea about any of this stuff, but here's some aspects of it that I might not have considered, but it's put together once again in a really good package where he's able to find just excellent anecdotes and weave them into a narrative. So it's not just a matter of like, how the fuck does someone decide to buy an ice cream cone or something, but like what happens when every one of the triply redundant hydraulic systems on a 740 on a DC-10 fail, and you're in the sky with 350 people lives in your hand, and what do you do in that circumstance? And it's like fucking classic page turner, when you're reading about that situation, and it's like, what better way to package a neuroscience lesson than that?
Yeah, there's also the part which is similar to that, where he talks about, I guess, chapter 4, the uses of reason, where he talks about the Man Gulch brush fire, and how this fire was basically chasing all of these smoke jumpers, who are the firefighters that put out these kinds of fires, and basically this guy is running. His name is Wag Dodge, who's a veteran with 9 years of firefighting experience, and everyone's running to get away from this flame, from this rush of fire, and he sort of realizes that it's going to overtake them, and he tells everyone to stop. But the point that Lehrer's making in it is that everyone else's fear centers was completely, they were completely guiding them, and they just couldn't stop. They just kept going. And he had this flash of insight where he turned around, he realized that the flame, because it was sucking out the oxygen, it was going to overtake them. They just couldn't outrun it. It was moving too fast. And so he turned around, stopped, lit a match, and created like a small sort of burned out a particular area and laid down on top of it. And
it was like you got to emphasize that point, because in my mind it was like he fucking lights a match, throws it like a foot in front of him, and then it's like the fucking Back to the Future DeLorean just like ripped through and created this just giant,
Yeah, I mean, I'll
just strip burn out territory.
Exactly. So I'll just read it. It's pretty short. He says, in a fit of desperate creativity, he came up with an escape plan. He quickly lit a match and ignited the ground in front of him. He watched as those flames raced away from him up the canyon walls. Then Dodge stepped into the ashes of this smaller fire so that he was surrounded by a thin buffer of burned land. He lay down on the still smoldering embers. He wet his handkerchief with some water from his canteen and clutched the cloth to his mouth. He closed his eyes tight and tried to inhale the thin ether of oxygen remaining near the ground. Then he waited for the fire to pass around him. After several terrifying minutes, Dodge emerged from the ashes virtually unscathed. And the thing is, 13 smoke jumpers were killed by that fire, and only 2 men in the crew besides him managed to survive, and that was because they found a shallow crevice in the rocky hillside.
So is it in his case? Well, go on. Let me finish your.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it was like the other example you gave of the DC-10, like where, I mean, what's amazing about this is this happened in a much shorter period of time, but they're both amazing because these guys came up with insights that, at least in recorded human history, they came up with things that hadn't been done before and executed them. Under extreme
and in
pressure.
both of their circumstances, under life and death pressure,
yes,
which doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to bring out the best thinking in someone, because far from it in most cases. And I mean, in the cases, obviously, in that story of everyone else he was with.
Yeah, and now firewalls are pretty standard firefighting technique.
So, Robert, were you about to say something?
No, I haven't read the book, so I'm just looking.
Okay.
You guys going?
Well, that's fine. It's good. It's always good to have someone who's the what? Why do I care? I mean, you could play that part. You could play that part in it. So to back it up,
I'll hold that card for now, and then I'll bring it out on you.
Okay, nice. So to back it up for a second, there, we're talking about how he's illustrating some of the research that he's talking about. And in these cases, what it is a matter of basically the prefrontal cortex doing work when there's it's not a matter of just simply relying on your intuition and on experience in the way that it might, where that intuition experience is telling you to fucking head for the hills, which is what everyone else tried to do. But at the beginning of the book, he starts off, he's actually takes great pains to establish the importance of emotion in decision making. And the most let me look for the word. The best example is just that when people have prefrontal cortex damage, what you get is when the emotional part of their brain is damaged, the prefrontal cortex is fine. That's the part of your brain that's basically helping you work through things and to think actively. When you're holding a thought in your mind and you sense yourself weighing a decision, and you're like, kind of like the dude in Next Friday who was like faced with the quandary of counting his money or getting with his chicas. He's like, you can count the green or get in between. I can count the green. So that's the part of your brain that's like basically sub-vocalizing that part. But when you had these people who they had no access to the emotional part, they just couldn't do anything. They could not decide the simplest thing. It's like go to a restaurant, they have to calculate the distance, the parking, what the lighting's like in each individual place, the entirety of options on the menu. When they feel they've come to some tentative conclusion, they'll actually start to drive and scout the areas and go in one and then go into another. And it's just like basic, absolute inability to decide, because without just that emotional thing to just say, okay, fuck it. Like at some point, I've been presented with the options of the prefrontal cortex. Now I just need to do. They just couldn't do that. And that was really fascinating. I mean, what a horrible, aside from the fact that you wouldn't have emotions of, meaningful context, would be disastrous in the first place. But I mean, just wouldn't anticipate that result. So I'll let you. I mean, what did you make of that case, End Guy?
Well, I think I had read some of this stuff before, and I don't know if it was in maybe a Malcolm Gladwell piece or somewhere else, but just about that idea of like the role emotions play in decision making, and I guess it makes sense in that without it, how do you weight decisions? Like as a human being, right? I mean, obviously you can do it sort of rationally and say, well, this decision is sort of 5% better than this decision. But what these people were doing was like they were stuck in a loop. They were generating all of this information, but they couldn't act on it. They couldn't wait on it. They weren't having any sort of emotional response to what's there. And so the first anecdote that the book opens, and we were talking about this in our virtual green room, I guess, is the idea is like how much of this stuff in the book deals with games. So the first anecdote is a flight simulator. The second one is Tom Brady in the 2002 Super Bowl. And that's sort of going through a number of decisions he made. And as anyone, I know Luke's obviously a big fan of football, and others of us are. And when you're in the quarterback, you're in the pocket. There's all of this stimulus coming at you. There's danger because the opposing O-line, they're trying to get to you, and you've got to make some important decisions pretty quickly under pressure. And what the book is arguing is that there are emotional weights that start to be attached to possibilities that are down the field. It's not simply rational, and that's part of how a quarterback like Tom Brady can make decisions so quickly, is that he might see something, but he has a bad feeling about it. He has a gut reaction, like there's something wrong with it, that there's no time to articulate it in the moment, so you start looking for the next thing and the next thing, and like going through the reads and finding the one. Part of what will activate the one that is the successful decision, if it is successful, is that there's a positive feeling associated with it, and that's where dopamine comes in.
Mm-hmm. And the whole idea there that your brain is functioning, on the subconscious level, that and it basically then has to translate whatever calculations it's performed into something that's consciously accessible. But well before it does that is when you begin to have those emotional triggers. And so in the case of people, when there's like a great deal of experience underlying the decision, so in the case of football, if you're a quarterback, obviously he's had a lifetime of making those kinds of decisions, so they're able to safely act on those impulses, when you have a proven track record of doing well by listening to those. But it's in the cases when you start to listen to those when you don't have that proven track record that
sorry, I was just going to say, this makes me think of stuff that I've read about people trying to make computer programs that can play Go, the game Go, against humans, and how now you can make a computer that can stand up to and sometimes beat the best chess players in the world.
But
with Go, which has way simpler rules that people don't necessarily like strategize over, like great Go players, they learn like the systems of the way things work intuitively, and they just sort of play it by feel without thinking it out in the way that you would think out chess strategy or whatever. And that's really difficult to make a computer program capable of competing with a human player, because they're not able to feel out that same sort of strategy.
Totally. And this comes up. I mean, he's talking about there's a comparison between like Deep Blue being trained to play chess, but then comparatively, there's a story of a guy who he's a world-class chess player, but he also plays backgammon religiously, and then poker as well. And then the machines start to run into some serious problems with backgammon, but then of course they're absolutely useless in poker. For
you should see him play Candyland.
Dude, they're good at Candyland. You know what? They're all probably good at Mario Party.
Probably.
For the reasons everyone's good at Mario Party.
Well, it's interesting because there's a part you mentioned about the guy whose, I guess, orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC, was missing, and that's the part that's responsible for integrating visceral emotions into the decision-making process. And then without those visceral emotions, he couldn't. He was paralyzed, right? He couldn't make any decisions. So there's a part later on in the same Uses of Reason chapter where they talk about a woman named Mary Jackson, who was going to an Ivy League university, and she'd had some damage to her prefrontal cortex. And what this created was a situation like where now she had no impulse control. So it was the opposite decision. Is like she was doing everything and things she hadn't done before. So she started to drink alcohol, which she had never done before. She started going to bars and dance clubs, sleeping with random guys, and like smoking crack.
Taking craps on model trains.
I don't believe so. But
She would have. She would have.
Yeah, and
that's an inside joke for subscribers of Sean.
My Twitter feed, sorry.
And eventually she contracted HIV because of this activity, and so the guy she went to a neurologist and started doing some tests, and he did this test where he put a comb in front of her and told her not to touch it, and she immediately picked it up and started combing her hair. He put a pen and paper in front of her and told her to just keep her hand still, automatically started writing, and just like was distracted looking for new goals, like all of this stuff. And it was just, so she had like no impulse control. So it's interesting that it's the difference between the orbitofrontal cortex and the prefrontal cortex, and like what damage to different areas of the brain, the different results it can bring out in the person.
I think this explains my problem with free open bags of Cheetos.
You cannot stop yourself?
I can't stop. It doesn't matter. I know I'm trivializing the subject, and I'm sorry, and I'll let it get serious again. But at EA on every other Friday, they have a TGIF thing where it's for the Sims group, and so all the Sims people come out from their cubes, and they put out bags of food and beer, and this thing is like studiously non-healthy. They don't have one damn healthy thing out there. It's like the worst of the worst, like total indulgence. And I sit there and I like stuff my fucking face, and I can't stop, even though I know I need to. I can't. Like, I lose my willpower completely. To the point where, like, I go home on Friday night and I can't eat dinner because I've eaten so much.
Yeah,
you're not trivializing anything. You're making us want to fucking help you. Like, you need an intervention or something, dude.
It's really weird. I mean, part of me is going like, wow, this is horrible and awful, and this food is terrible. Anyway, I don't even really like it. And I'm like talking to people, and I'm like spewing Cheeto dust out them as I'm talking. I can't stop eating.
It's actually a good little quick aside that I'm reading this book called The End of Overeating by David Kessler, and he's this medical researcher guy, and his book is all about all of this research into the ways that basically the food industry manipulates your appetite through the use of various ingredients that that sort of supercharge the pleasure centers of your brain. So like fat, sugar, and salt. And
Yep.
Cheetos are definitely an example of something that is basically engineered to when you eat one, it makes you want to eat more. Because it sort of creates this feedback loop of opiates in your brain, and the more opiates you have in your brain, the more you want to eat Cheetos. So,
yeah, I definitely feel that. I think there's also like a psychological problem that I'm aware of with these, which is that when not just Cheetos, but any kind of like salty snack food, this stuff when I was a boy in the 60s and 70s was banned from our house because my mom was kind of like a nouveau hippie at the time, and so all my friends who were eating this stuff, who had them in their bag lunches and stuff, I was insanely jealous, and I couldn't eat it. It was like a forbidden thing. So as soon as I got to college, it's like my one guilty pleasure. It's still, to this day in my 40s, I see chips, and it's like this thing I wasn't allowed to eat. And
yeah,
so
I think that's a big problem. Like for how the hell do you raise your kids to like not be junk food addicts? Like either you give it to them at home or they get it when they leave and go nuts for it. I mean, I guess it's similar to like alcohol or something.
Exactly. I think you just sort of demystify it, and then it's not a problem. I mean, that's certainly been the experience as a parent now with my own kid, who we have avoided all these sort of hang-ups just because we just say whatever. It's just no big deal,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
go ahead and have that crack.
Yeah, I guess if you offer them like good food next to it, and they can sort of compare and contrast, like, do I want Cheetos or do I want a meal that my family actually cooked for me?
That's exactly right.
I want to see you on Wife Swap. Have you ever seen that show? I want to see you on there, Jeff. But it probably wouldn't
There would
work.
be
because-
it would be this woman who would come in and be like, "No more wow."
Yeah.
House.
Well, the thing is
Like,
with
make-
Wife Swap, maybe you're sufficiently freakish, Jeff, because you have to be like a freak is one of the conditions, or you have to be like the fucking total counter freak. But you also have to be someone who with like, dude. I mean, this is sad that I'm admitting I watched this show, but they wouldn't have a show if they basically got easygoing people who are like, yeah, I get to be on TV for a week. Fuck it. If this chick wants me to fucking dress up in clown makeup because she's a clown family, fucking so be it, right? But immediately they get these people that somehow signed up to be on this TV show and everything, and then the fucking wife comes in and they're like,
Yep.
fuck that, I ain't doing that. Get the fuck out.
It's like
I
during
think-
the interviews, they interview the people and find out like, well, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but I do have this irrational fear of clowns.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit,
They
what about that
cross
clown
reference.
family?
I wonder
Yeah.
what their database is like because they have to have tons and tons of submissions, and they're basically trying to like draw lines between them and create like the ideal pairs. But I mean, ideal meaning the fucking least suitable for one another.
I also
Well, the
just
one
wonder
that was
how
on
much-
recently with this San Francisco guy who got completely demonized for being such a total dickhead on TV. You know, that was a pure case of where the producers put together two families that it was just doomed to failure, right?
Yeah, that's the whole point.
And the guy was a dick, but
But
The other thing about that show is like just seeing how fucking miserable people's lives are. I mean, they always try to spin it at the very end. They always want to end on this note of like learning and mutual appreciation. But the fucking
Right.
preceding like 25 minutes or however long that show is are all about you sitting there and saying, thank God my life isn't like, thank God my wife isn't a cunt like that. Thank God like my kids aren't retarded and fat. Like, I mean, that's all that shit's about, man.
you put it so eloquently, Sean. I also just think sometimes when I watch that show, like the clips that I've seen, I feel like it's one of those shows where people are totally playing the reality TV roles. Like they just know how they're supposed to behave. Like that one that was going around with the that was really popular with the junk food eating fat family and the,
Yeah, that kid and the chicken fingers.
yeah, and he would eat chicken fingers or chicken nuggets or whatever for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they would stash like their snack food all throughout the house and try to hide it from one another because their big like family joke was that you would come in and eat all of your your family member's favorite snack while they weren't looking or something, which is an amazing amazing family tradition. But immediately when the healthy wife comes into the fat family's house and starts throwing out stuff, you see them like acting like the reality TV people they've seen on TV. They know that they're supposed to make a big drama out of it.
Right. Well, that's what the San Francisco guy, that was his excuse once he started getting villainized, and he had to like resign from some organizations he was in just because they didn't want to be associated with him. His life. No, it's true. You can find this stuff
On the internet.
online by Google. On the internet, his wife had to apologize on her own blog, which is a popular blog in its own right for the line of work she's in on behalf of her husband. And his whole excuse was, well, they said to sort of play this up for the TV show. I'm not really this big a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always
But then
wonder
you
about
have-
that. And with all
But
those
why
shows,
play along? Yeah. Well, that's a
Yeah.
that's a problem I think with reality TV in general. Is there's always there can be like a first season of the innocents, right? Who are sort of learning by doing, and then everybody else is kind of like playing the part that they saw in previous seasons. It's very hyper reality at that point.
and even producers, you have to imagine, like even like on the shit like The Bachelor and stuff, like there's always like some kind of fine print I've heard that says decisions are assisted by producers or something like that. Because I mean, like you have some show with the cast of people and involves kicking some off. You don't want to kick off the ones with like with the douchiest personality in the first night because you're going to have to rely on that conflict for the entire season. So
Did you
See,
guys have
like it's sort of like the. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, do you guys happen to see the links that were going around to this new reality TV show that's supposed to be about competitive video gamers who live in?
Oh, fuck that, dude. Yes, it's
Oh, my
horrible.
God, I can't remember what that's called though. It's like it's like CG. It's not CGS because that was another
WCG.
Yeah, WCG or something like that. Yeah, it's this ridiculous thing where they pick these random people who are actually like not even remotely good at video games and have them sort of compete at games against each other and live in an apartment together and have all of the annoying
Have their lives taped.
Yeah. Yeah, and
The
they have the
story
same
about 7 gamers who live in a house. Have their lives taped.
Yeah, the real version
Find
of
out.
that show would not be suitable for family viewing.
No.
Why is it that
But I
half
mean,
the
the-
shit that comes
they're
out
fair.
nowadays you can't tell, like you're waiting the entire time to see that it's like a clip from like SNL or some shit like that. I mean, it's just like everything that's being presented seriously. You're like, dude, no, are you serious? And they are.
So what I was
I
going to
think
say
honestly
about
that- Go ahead.
yeah, well,
ahead.
just about I'm slightly changing the subject, so you go first.
Oh no, I totally even just forgot what I was gonna say. So fuck
Awesome.
it.
This is what's great about podcasting with the Stone guy.
It's not true.
Dude, Robert says he gets like it's more of a body high when he eats it, like he's been doing.
Shut the fuck up. Do not perpetuate this myth.
I know it's everyone listening. It's not. Real.
It's just your voice.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm gonna
so what I was
like
gonna
a
say was
voice
this hyper reality and playing the role thing that could happen in the podcasting world too. Like who plays the role of Shane Bettenhausen on the One Up Yours, right? Like I noticed that in not just on NeoGAF but all around this sort of question of like, well, who's going to replace him and people's expectations as listeners and viewers of who has to play these particular parts, and even you too, Luke, right? When you left, who was going to play the part of Luke?
Right.
Oh, David Ellis,
is-
obviously.
Right.
This is what's
And
fucked up because those. I know, Luke, you and I disagree. We've had arguments, and you've publicly said that Shane's playing a part. And for me, Shane never played a part, and I say that with all the years of that I've known him, and that he was just being himself. And people say, I mean, and that's good to me. I mean, I would rather have that than saying that like I'm insincerely trying to create drama.
Wait,
or whatever.
are you sure that Shane was not simply the Daniel Day-Lewis of video game journalism?
A video game podcasting. So he was always himself, but the fact that it became a perception and it was widely accepted that he was playing a role, then made it so that there now is the Shane role, and that there's like this acute sense of the vacuum there, and so people want to fill it as though you could fill it by manufacturing it rather than just by being yourself and having someone.
This is what I'm saying.
Same,
Right.
Shane.
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
And Luke, and goes for Luke too. Yeah.
Right, both those guys, and I agree. I agree that I think that Shane is just being Shane. It's just that part of being Shane is actually kind of playing this role. I mean, he purposely tweaks people. That's who Shane is. So I think he believes most of what he's saying, but he's definitely saying a lot of it, kind of with a grin on his face, like, I know I'm fucking with you. So.
But he knows that his perspective on it is going to piss you off. It's not that
Yes,
he's fucking with you. It's not his true perspective. Like every line about Sony and everything. I mean, that's all from the heart,
Right.
But it's like the smile is because I don't know. You explain the shit-eating grin, Luke, and it's a good one. Like, so Shane, if you somehow listen to this, I know you're not. Like, it's nothing. It's all love, man.
We all love Shane.
We were all at Robert's last night, rolling around in that bag of weed.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, if we want to be serious real quick, I did want to come back to, not to get bogged down in the How We Decide book again, but I wanted to relate it to games quickly in a way
Actually,
that...
I had a serious point on that one too.
Every-
When you guys were talking, I was thinking, I haven't read this book either, but you made the comment about football players. I'm not much of a football fan, but I am a basketball fan, and as listening to you guys talk, it made me think: maybe that is what's so appealing to me, and why I and other people will idolize certain basketball players. It's because of that split-second decision-making that they can make that seems somehow superhuman or at some level that I know in the same situation I could never do. How did Magic Johnson ever know to do that thing at that particular second?
Right.
I wonder if that's where my interest in sports comes from.
One of the craziest things, not that crazy really, but one of the most interesting things that Magic Johnson ever did. This was the year they went to the finals. The Lakers went to the finals against the Bulls and lost. It was Michael Jordan's first championship. But in the previous round, they were playing the Trailblazers, and it was I think it was a game 6. The Lakers won in 6 games, and there was it was either a missed free throw or a tipped rebound or something. And it was getting close, like the clock was getting close to expiring. There's maybe 5 seconds left. And what Magic did, rather than like run the ball out or go for a shot or whatever, was he threw the ball down the court, but he kind of flipped it over his head and like rolled it. So it had this spin on it.
Right.
Which made it go. It was too fast for anyone to catch up with, but slow enough that it was running out the clock. And you're just
this is one of the moments I was thinking of. Yeah.
And I'm just like, how the hell did he come up with that?
Exactly. And certainly Michael Jordan has a whole career of those moments, right?
Well,
where you just watch it on replay, and it's just like, how did that ever happen in his brain? In the
very next round against the Lakers, when he did that move will be on highlights forever, where he's going towards the basket, and then at the last second he switches hands among the Lakers thicket of big men, and you're just like, that move is insane.
So let's take that same thinking and port it over to video games, where we can all be superstars at some point along those lines. Right? And for me, that's part of like the same feeling you get if you're playing, like, in my case, like an RTS or an FPS that I play religiously, and it gets to the point where I no longer have to actively think, and to the contrary, it's probably detrimental to my play in like Company Heroes if I start overanalyzing what I'm doing.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because when I was reading the Tom Brady part, I was going to ask you about exactly that, because I know you play a ton of Company of Heroes, and like saying, like, can you relate to that, like a game that you know intimately, and like when you're playing it competitively, when you're playing against someone else, if you think about your own thought process or emotional process, what goes through you?
Yeah. In fighting games as well, I've been playing a lot of Soul Calibur 4 lately, so I've been thinking it there, and it's like when you choke is when you're actively starting to think about what's happening. And then, like, if I'm in a team game like Company Heroes, like, people will just say, because we start talking, people just be like, shut up and play, and that basically means rely on the expertise you've proven yourself to have. But as far as games go, what I was thinking for single player games, games are very much about decision making and providing choices. The quality of those choices, I think, is something we can discuss. But in my mind, I think the most enjoyable games are the ones that have like this excellent balance of letting us feel competent, not making us feel like we totally have no idea what's happening, in the way that I still might get if I pick up a foreign game or something, like an overly complicated PC game. And so you have that initial, like, if it's an FPS, you're like, okay, I understand how to move. I'm used to that. I've dealt with grenade launchers before. I have a sense for how to place shots, even though I'm not using a crosshair for it and all this stuff. And then they also introduce the right amount of things where you have to stop and use your prefrontal cortex and work things out. You have to make a decision that could be meaningful in the long run. And I don't know if that holds true for you guys, but I think if those are out of whack and it's like leaning too much in one direction, like say if it's a game, it's an FPS that's so simple that it's requiring nothing but that rote memorization. Just what I'm familiar with. It's not going to be anywhere near as fun. Or if it's another game that's required, like an RTS for the first like month you play it, that's nothing but the conscious part of your decision making.
That's what I so love about a lot of Nintendo games. I feel that they get that balance just right. They reward you for both the you get trained, you learn how to do something in Zelda. And then the next time you have to use that thing that you've learned, they up the ante just enough that you now have to think on your feet while applying what you've already learned. And they keep that kind of rhythm going steadily throughout the game without ever making you feel like, one, you're just rehashing the same shit over and over and over, like grinding in an RPG, or unfairly stacking the deck against you with something crazy that you haven't learned before, which of course often happens in boss fights.
It's saving. They also save the difficult decisions that require what I keep referring to as prefrontal cortex's input for things that, like, they're drawing attention to themselves. It's clearly about, okay, we know that this is going to stop and make people use another part of their brain and react differently to it, and just making the most of that.
And if the designers aren't assholes, they'll put a save point right before that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what I like about games like Geometry Wars, for instance, or Every Extend Extra. I feel like they have that. There's a twitch level on which you play the game, but there's also a strategic level on which you play the game, and both are kind of happening. Both are happening simultaneously. So there's a part like where you can't think too much about the moment to moment. Like if you start thinking, oh, I've got to dodge this, or oh, I've got to, like, consciously thinking it, you're probably going to crash. So there's part of your brain, and that just, it feels like part of your brain works on that, just sort of like the very twitchy responses to where to go, what direction to shoot, whether to move and shoot in the same direction or different directions. But then there's another thing which is sort of like picking up points in the Geometry Wars on DS and Wii, where it was like point pickups and like other things. Like, what's a larger strategy of what you're trying to do? And I love those games for that.
I was just going to say, have you guys ever had the experience of? I've had this happen to me a lot with games that are predominantly twitchy, like Geometry Wars, like the original Geometry Wars, which has elements of some strategy that you want to sort of loop around the screen and find a path or whatever. But mainly it's a twitch game, and I find sometimes with a twitch game that if I distract myself by listening to like NPR or something beyond just music, where I can be or like talking on the phone or talking to somebody who's in the room, or maybe you've got people over and you're not really paying that much attention to the game, that those will end up being the games that I make the highest score when I'm really not. I don't let the stress get to me because I'm not paying attention. Yes. So I'm sitting there making these like rote sort of quick decisions.
This is probably also what happens when there's the dude who's like, man, when I get ripped, I play this game so well. Oh, God. It might be some of that same, just putting that out there.
I have found that I totally know what you're talking about, Robert. There have been times where I'll be stuck in a certain game, and it can be a Twitch kind of game like that. And if I'm doing it while on the phone with the sound down, or sometimes even if I'm not doing anything else, but I turn the sound of the game down, suddenly the stress is reduced, and I can clear it easily.
Yeah.
Well, what about Lumines, though, where the sound of the game is actually, it's not only complementing it, but it's helping you stay in the zone, stay in that mindset where you're just using that subconscious part of your brain, and you're not like, you just get sort of enveloped in that experience. And I found that it worked especially well in that case, in Lumines's case, where it's like there's just no thinking, there's no like sub-vocalized thinking going on.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
Yeah, and sadly, I think that's one of the things that I really look for in games is that I want a game to fully occupy my mind so that I can stop thinking for however long it'll like work its little magic spell.
Well, sure, right.
There's a lot of people that share that with you, I think, and they're the ones who are they make introducing choices and dilemmas in the games difficult, because I think people are faced with enough of that in real life. They've only got X number of dollars in their bank account, and they have to decide what they're going to buy for dinner or what they're going to do. They can only have one relationship at a time, or whatever the case is. And so they get in a game, it's this fantasy world, and it's kind of like the people that would read the old Choose Your Own Adventures books, and they want to simultaneously like read every page and flip, I'm going to scan this outcome, but whatever, I'm going to go this one. And so when you put those things in games where people really have to stop and they think, okay, this decision is going to change, the outcome of the game is going to change the course of play for a significant amount of time, And you get those things where, like, Warren Spector is talking about, where you put multiple paths in Deus Ex, and it just ends up confounding itself because people will try to go halfway down one and explore it, and always just try to come back and make sure that they didn't miss anything on the other path as well. So that's kind of interesting to me.
I don't mind like a substantial amount of thinking in games, and actually I sometimes think that can be the thing that sort of obliterates your conscious mind or whatever when you're fully occupied like making decisions and stuff. That's cool too. It just sort of depends on what kind of decision making that is. Like I really loved the game Braid, which every single puzzle is like a kind of a mind fuck because it's the opposite of what you think of a game like a Nintendo game where you're learning where you're learning a skill and then applying it over and over again. Every single puzzle is a totally new set of rules, really. I mean, there are basic rules that apply for each level that you learn or whatever, but you never do the same puzzle twice, and so it's always something new. But that game totally grabbed me and kept me playing it, and it didn't allow me to let the sort of creeping other things that I'm trying to keep at bay when I'm trying to relax come in and bother me or whatever. Whereas something like I think what you're talking about, like making decisions in a narrative game where you're about to make a big decision and it could impact how things are going to work out, like in Dead Space, I would totally get tripped up by that stuff because I realized that the decisions that you make in that game when it comes to your resources or whatever really did matter. It was a really tight economy and you were making significant decisions, and it would really like kind of worry me. I was like, oh, am I going to do this right? Am I doing this wrong? Am I buying a stupid weapon? What am I doing?
Were you tempted to save the game right before you committed to that decision too?
Yeah, definitely.
It's part of that. It's interesting you say about Braid because I think that could be the case again for the people that found it frustrating. It was because it was, you look at it and you're like, hey, I have a level of familiarity with this type of game being like, a platformer or something, and they're thinking Mario Brothers, and they start playing it and they find out that actually their intuition, for as far as it's informed by previous experience goes, is not necessarily going to help them. They're going to have to actually think, along different lines. And yeah, go ahead. There's something I've been meaning to say, and I keep forgetting it as soon as I say something else.
One thing I was going to say about the difference that Robert's talking about between, a narrative game and, something that's more twitchy or maybe a better balance is that, maybe part of the reason that we respond so strongly to Twitch games is because action, decision, and result happen very close together. So the iterative loop, the learning loop, is happening really fast. Whereas a decision you're making about what to buy in Dead Space, you might not see the result of that. You probably won't. I mean, you do get a visual response. Let's say you buy a new piece of armor or a new weapon, you'll see it and those kinds of things. But the full impact of that decision is not going to be known for perhaps several minutes or even an hour or two. And so that's like where you sort of in the back of your mind you have a lot more time to second guess the decision you made.
And also, I'm not saying this is the case with Dead Space, but we do know that the more options you present someone who's forced to make a decision, you can get to a point where they ultimately stop caring about it. I mean, you give people too many options and it's just like, it's meaningless. The choice itself becomes meaningless. It's just a matter of like, okay, whatever, just fucking grab one.
Well, that's why one of the games that I've probably said it on our podcast here before, that I feel has like one of the best feedback loops in modern games is the Ratchet and Clank games. And the reason is because the way you improve your weapons is you use them. So there's a particular weapon you like to use, you use it, and it levels up over time. And at a certain point, you're going to max it out. And like now, they've started doing this thing like where there are these upgrade paths, and I actually like that less. Because it does get into, I think, exactly what Robert's talking about, what you just talked about, Sean, is this idea that like I'm being presented with all these choices, and this isn't true for every game. I'm loath to sort of say like, hard and fast rule, this is the way every game should be, but I will say what I do really like about the Ratchet and Clank games is that it's that simple, is that instant reaction, and the long-term reward is tightly integrated with my moment-to-moment decision making. So all I have to think about is, wow, I like this bolt rifle or whatever it is. I'm going to keep using it, and I know I'm going to be rewarded beyond just like seeing the enemies blow up and the cool explosions and all that, but it's going to level up. It's going to be more powerful. I'm going to get additional visual effects that are going to go along with it, and that's a really powerful way, I think, to design a game.
I would also just say that, like, for me, one of the things, and maybe this ties back into the book, I didn't read it, but I would imagine that this is one of the things they talk about, which is that, like, I'm pretty much like I'm a gut level kind of decider on things most of the time, and I enjoy that. I sort of take pride on just sort of, on a whim, making a decision, and it usually works out pretty well. You know, like last night, this is a kind of a stupid example, but like I go to Walgreens with my wife, and we have to get, you know, Mother's Day cards, and my wife spends like 20 minutes picking a card out, and then I show up like right before we're supposed to leave, and I just grab one and go, and I'm fine with that. You know, like I literally just, I see one out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, okay, here we go.
There are many studies discussed in the book where sometimes people give people more information and more time to deliberate on them, and they make demonstrably poor choices for it.
Sure.
And there are also times when it's the reverse, but it just depends on what exactly the choice is. I mean, and Guy, you might be able to fill me in. It's been a couple weeks since I read it, and I stupidly didn't mark those pages. But I did find that interesting. And before I forget, what I wanted to bring up though is when we're talking about when you can use the instinctive aspects of your learning to play a game. You know, when people first started talking about gaming literacy, you know, a few years back, I assumed that this is ultimately what they meant. And it turned out really they were just finding another way to have a discussion about what your game collection actually was. But when you think of it like it meaning the degree of familiarity you have with the systems that govern games and the way that they're constructed, when you don't have that, what it means is that people that are like coming new to games are going to be potentially have a you know, they're going to have a totally different experience than us, and it's going to be much more frustrating because they're having to actively think through everything. And then when all of our experience tells us, hey, you think you're stuck. Like, here's a concrete example. I was playing Fear 2 recently. I got to a point that I pretty quickly figured out was like a bug. It was a scripting bug, and that the script trigger was never going to activate, and I was never going to be able to proceed through this level. But had I not, it was a number of things that gave me that sense. I just knew, okay, the level's not going to be designed in such a way to make me do this much work in order to find where I'm going, because it was just a casual scene. It wasn't, you know, like planned this way, and a number of other things. But so someone without that would have probably been stuck who knows how long, as long as their patience allowed them to keep wandering back and forth and trying things that we would know never to try in a game because it just seem absurd to us, you know. So I think that's like a real challenge.
Similar happened to me, and sorry, I was just going to say I had something really similar happen to me when I was playing through the game Xenoclash. I had a bug happen where I was supposed to fight an enemy that I couldn't leave the area until the enemy was dead, and the enemy had a sound. He was a drummer. He was a musician, and he had like drums and all this music stuff that was blaring out of him, and the enemy was invisible, and I actually thought that it was part of the game, like, because I could hear him, right? Because if he was just invisible and didn't make sounds, I would realize it was a bug, but because he made sounds, I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be like finding this guy with the stereo field, and I actually like found him and killed him, but I had to try it like 3 different times because every time I reloaded it just reloaded the bug. And I actually ended up killing him without seeing him, and I thought it was part of the game. And then I realized when he died and appeared that I was supposed to be seeing him.
So, I mean, you were probably frustrated to the point of like considering stopping the game altogether, right? Now imagine without any of that. I mean, it's a simple way of saying something, but I think it's important, you know, like Luke and I, when we're working in companies that produce games, I mean, it's just a long-winded way of saying you have to keep everyone in mind. But the better, I think it's also a matter of like not reinventing what doesn't need reinventing, and not putting difficult things on, not overemphasizing things that aren't really important decisions. Like, say in a game, like maybe how you perform an action, how you open a door or something, that shouldn't be the decision. You know, I mean, these things can be really simple, but then really underscoring and emphasizing the parts that you want people to actively understand as an important decision.
Yeah, I've had some interesting experiences.
And Jeff, you too. Sorry, you tell us.
Yeah, that's okay.
I didn't even.
That's okay. No
He
worries.
thought you were
Jeff
he
Green is
thought you were
your-
off with your wife or something.
Your game will be out before any of ours, perhaps. So why don't you
Probably will be. I can actually say what I'm working on now because it was announced, and it's called MySims Agents, and it's the latest in the ever multiplying MySims franchise. And I'm not allowed, I don't think, to talk about much of it yet, but what I can say is that the operating principles, it's kind of like, surprisingly, sort of an old-fashioned adventure game. So the fun for me has actually been writing dialogue, and I'm definitely trying to keep in mind the spirit of old LucasArts games as I'm working on dialogue and the text when you interact with objects, and trying to make it as goofy as I can get away with, given the constraints of the franchise. However, what I wanted to bring up just in line of this is the interesting design decisions that I've been part of or just observed in terms of how difficult to make puzzles, whether they're jumping games or these kind of like mini game brain things, given the age that we're shooting for versus the desires of the game makers who are adult gamers themselves to have these things be challenging, as well as sort of basic game philosophy of are we going to give these people an out so that they aren't stuck forever and have to quit the game because they couldn't figure it out? Or are we going to make them do something? Well, I'll give you a specific example of something that I was actually involved in an argument just yesterday at work. There's a section of the game I'm working on where there's an elaborate section of jumping and balancing and things like that. And when you get to the top of this area, it turns out that you're not actually supposed to be there yet. That the door that you're going to go through to proceed to the next part of the game, that's not active until you do another puzzle. Okay? So when I came into the game, and I came in late on this project and was given the assignment of looking at this level, I said, why don't we just make it so that the player can't go up there until they really need to? We can just come up with a fiction so that they can't make the first jump at the bottom yet. They can see that at some point they're going to be able to go up there. But for right now, let's just disable that so that they don't do this whole elaborate thing and then get to the top only to find out, oh shit, all I can do here is jump back down to the bottom. Thanks for nothing, game designers. but that led to an argument at work, and it was an interesting one, and I don't think that was necessarily a right or wrong, even though I think I'm right. But where they were saying, well, no, let's not gate anything. Let's not bar any ability to explore. It might be fun for them just to go up there anyway, without a reward. And then later, when they get this clue, they'll know, oh, I have to go do that climb again. I disagreed with that, but again, I think it's just a fundamental kind of game design decision that I don't think there's a right or wrong, but it's really, really interesting, and I think it can make all the difference between whether gamers get frustrated or not.
Well, especially if you think of the Metroid games, which were sort of, pretty masterful at showing you areas that you couldn't yet get to, but there were things, there would be either color clues or other clues that sort of communicated to players pretty clearly that you've gotten to this point, you don't have what you need to get through it yet, but at some point you will. And so it seems to me is that if there's a way in the overall design of the game that's being communicated, then then it wouldn't be a bad thing to let them explore. But otherwise, I think your impulse was right.
Right. Yeah.
Let's get Luke to sound off on hard and soft blockages.
No. I don't want to talk about that terrible thing you made me look at before the show.
No, I don't mean that. I just mean I don't know what you guys call them. I just figure action games. I mean, it's like blockages. It's like it's like everything you're saying, Jeff. Yeah, it's like it's going to come up over and over again. How specifically to handle them.
Well, and we're doing lots of play testing on some of the mini games, some of these brain games that are in the game, and we can't come up with any hard and fast rule. I mean, we'll show the same game to a 35-year-old guy who games all the time, and the same thing to a 10-year-old.
Uh-oh. Did we just lose Jeff Green?
We did.
Am I back?
You're back now.
Okay, I'm back.
I thought
All right.
I thought like a secret agent from EA had come and like stolen.
Yeah,
Jeff.
EA yanked my. No, I mean I don't. I'll guess I'll find out if I'm saying anything I shouldn't. But you know, there's no. We're not getting any data that's actually that relevant because it's different every time. Sometimes a 35-year-old will play it like 10 times and can't do it and get mad and yell at us. And another time, the 10-year-old will breeze through it on his first time. And sometimes it's vice versa. So, you know, we're sitting there debating like, well, shit, should we just put in some trigger that if they fail 20 times or whatever, or 10 times, they just get a pass? And you've got people on the design team saying, hell no. If they can't do this, they're too stupid, and fuck it, the game's over for them. And you've got other people saying, we can't ever do that. You know, we have to make sure that everybody can play this game all the way through to completion.
Can you make it so that you put in your age and make age specific puzzles so that like when you're like 40, all of the questions are about like Kiss albums and
well, it's not trivia stuff obviously. It's more like, you know, they're more like logic puzzle type things.
Yeah, no, I'm just reaching for like whatever cultural bat I can do.
Yeah. It's going to be like what We're Right wants in the future, where games basically redesign themselves specifically for each individual user. So like, you know, Robert, in your case, there will be a window where you just either say, you know, I had a half a pound of weed last night, or you can just breathe right into the DS microphone and it will fucking randomly
and the DS just goes, damn.
It just starts playing colors and shit.
Well, getting back to the book for a second, and sort of relating some of the stuff that we read to games. So there's a part in the book for those of you who are playing along with home. It's pages 180 to 188, and they talk about this game called the Ultimatum game, which is, you know, designed to illustrate decision making and sort of moral decision making. Moral choice. And so the idea is in the Ultimatum game, one person is given, there's two people who play the game. One person's given $10, and they get to propose a split of that $10 to the other person. If the other person accepts the split, so let's say I say, well, Sean, I'm going to give you $2, I'm going to keep $8. Only if Sean accepts the proposed split do we get any money. And we get the proposed split. So I would get 8, Sean would get 2. But if Sean rejects it, neither of us get anything. And what it's designed to do is sort of give a sense of the fellow feeling, the spirit of kinship that people feel towards others. And so apparently when these tests are run and people are in the same room, people are actually pretty fair. The splits are generally 50-50. And they've used that along with sort of hooking people up to MRIs to determine that, you know, altruism feels good, right? Now, autistic people struggle with this.
Don't give you shit.
And that's because they're emotionally isolated from other people. They'll see expressions on people's face and that kind of thing, but they find it hard to read. And so for them, what happens in a lot of cases is that they'll basically reduce it to complete math and say, well, I'm going to offer you 5 cents. And you should accept it because, well, that's 5 cents more than you had a minute ago, right? And so even though I'm keeping $9.95, I mean, you still come out ahead. Well, yeah,
that's a totally rational response to it.
Exactly, a completely rational response. Now, there's a variant on the Ultimatum game called the Dictator game, where one person decides how to split the money. So that would mean that I would say, all right, I'm going to give Sean $2, and Sean has no choice. Like that's the way it's gonna go down. And in that situation, tyrants, they call them tyrants because if one person gets to decide, they still give away about a third of the money. But this is the interesting part. When you create social isolation, like when you put two people in separate rooms, it reproduces a situation that's akin to autism. The tyrant, the person who gets to decide, stops simulating the feelings of other people and they behave more like an autistic, and keep way more of the money for themselves. And so I thought about that in a couple of ways. So one is thinking about
and let me pause real quick to remind you how many other ways that makes sense. Like, we know from kidnapping statistics that you are like 10 times likely to be murdered if you have a bag over your head, or if your face is obscured. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of things like that from war and from violent incidents and stuff where, anytime your identity is obscured, your life is in far, far greater danger than otherwise. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so the point is, it's like exactly along those lines. Like, what happens when you're isolated or socially isolated from people? So think about flame wars in message boards or verbal abuse on in-game chat. But the game I really wanted to relate this to was Left 4 Dead. And the reason is because, like, Left 4 Dead, I think, does like an excellent job of promoting altruism and that fellow feeling. And if you think about the ways in which they do it, obviously you can share your first aid kits and pills with other people. But there are ways what's just as important as that is the way it increases your awareness of your teammates, which I think reduces social isolation. So everyone's health bar and their loadout is shown. There's a yellow outline that lets you see everyone's position even through walls. When you move your reticle over pickups, your character automatically calls it out for your buddies to hear. When you shoot a friend, they call it out, and vice versa. And when a friend is downed, your friends call it out. I mean, the character calls it out, and vice versa. And you see it displayed on the HUD that they're downed. You see them in an icon of them in a prone position. And so Left 4 Dead, I think about it, and I wrote a little bit about this, and I wrote an Edge column about this, but I didn't have the benefit of reading How We Decide and sort of tying all of this stuff together. But it was the point I was trying to make, I guess a bit less eloquently, is like how Left 4 Dead makes us realize how powerful a tool altruism is within games, and how little multiplayer games and co-op games do to promote it, simply because they don't provide enough information about the state of your friends. So you're left with voice and a couple other things to determine it, and so you're socially isolated. We're all like sort of autistics playing these other games.
Yeah, it sounds cynical, but an altruistic act, especially in a video game, and to some extent in the larger world, has to be acknowledged. It has to be visible, but especially in a game, it's like, who's going to be the healer on a team if no one knows who's healing them, or to what extent their own success is facilitated by the work of the healer. And it's the difference between someone falls off a ledge and you run up and you grab them and you relive the moment that's been in every fucking action movie since there was such thing as an action movie. And then there's the one where you're a guy standing behind people and like maybe you threw a health pack into him, and the recipient had no idea that it even hit him, or that you were there, or they hadn't even called out for it or something. I think it's like a totally. It says a whole lot about altruism and helping one another in games. But then the other
of course,
part,
what you guys are talking about is really what MMOs are all about, though. MMOs are strictly, or for the most part, co-op games, right?
Yeah,
I mean, where
a good MMO.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Well, there's PvP, of course, but huge chunks of WoW. I mean, the majority of WoW players aren't PvP players. Their whole thing is being in groups and helping each other out.
And I'd say, like in a good MMO, in the best circumstances, everyone's very, very clearly aware of each individual group member's participation to the
exactly.
Right. On this whole business, though, I love experiments like the Prisoner's Dilemma and like the Ultimatum game and the Dictator game, and I think that I would love to see in the future far more manipulation of what we understand about social psychology from these, other than just, there's the one extent where you could say, and this is interesting because Valve does employ, as far as I understand, a full-time psychologist who gave a speech at GDC. But it's one thing to take these lessons and say, how do people respond to altruism? What encourages people to interact with one another and stuff? But then also to flip it and say, where does it break down, and can we game that? Are there ways to really play off these tensions where people are constantly, where it might be in an individual's interest to help a group in 1 second, it might be in his interest to help himself if he doesn't think that he's being viewed or can't immediately be punished for it, all that sorts of shit. And I think in the future it'll be interesting to see games start to to experiment with that stuff even more. I mean, it happens already just by default because human beings are involved in games. Like when you're playing all the way back to Contra and you're both running, and it's like your friend's like, "Why the fuck did you grab the spread shot again? You already had it." And you're like, "It just fell on me, man. It always just falls on me." I mean, and to take that to the next level, I think that'll have to the next. Dude, I just said that. Fucking kill me.
Yeah,
All right, I'm done. That's the end of this fucking podcast for me. I'll let you guys carry on.
Go on.
No, that's it. I'm fucking done. Go ahead. I hate myself.
You hate yourself for bringing up Contra?
No, because
For saying take it to the next level.
I take it to the next level, even higher yet, like Sculpture to Chichia Pet. Okay, come on.
That saved it. What?
Okay, no, I'm done. I'm done with what I had to say. Now it's getting all extra awkward.
I think we're done with this.
We're close to the end of the. Yeah, we're done with the segment, with the show, but we haven't heard much from Luke, and I want to bring him out of his.
I know.
Marley and me crying.
You guys have summed a lot of stuff up. I was thinking. I mean, it's hard to jump in because the subject changes and comes back, and this thing I listened to when you guys were talking about decision making. Lair talked on Public Radio Redux earlier this year about two scenarios. The first scenario is you are driving a trolley car that's out of control, and the only thing you can do is make this choice between going to the right, where the outcome is you will hit 4 people and they may or may not die, or you go to the left and you hit 1 person and that 1 person will definitely die, and asking people what decision they're gonna make here. And their answers in this particular question are actually very different from another scenario where you're on top of a bridge overlooking an out-of-control trolley car. The trolley car is going towards the same 4 people. The trolley car cannot change directions, but you're standing next to an inordinately fat man. And if you push this fat man, he'll fall off the bridge and block the trolley car. He'll die, but the 4 people will live. And they found that people were more willing when they're driving the trolley car to make the choice to kill 1 person because they could rationalize that the trolley car was killing the person, whereas if they were actually pushing the one man to kill this man to save the 4 people, then that act suddenly became they couldn't reconcile that act. And it's from February earlier this year. I listened to it last night. It was actually super interesting and ties in a little bit, especially with some of the scenarios that you could face potentially in a game like Left 4 Dead. And bless Valve, those guys did a bunch of really smart stuff in that game.
Yeah. We need more fat. What we're saying is we need fat people to push on the tracks in the games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it too, is that one of the things that by giving us more awareness of the state of our fellow players in Left 4 Dead, it also creates a situation where sacrifice becomes more. It can encourage sacrifice more. I mean, think of the number of Left 4 Dead games you've played, where you might be near the exit, you might be about to load out, and you'll go back for a friend simply because you see, and you just think oh, maybe if I charge in, I might be able to save them. You're having this awareness really makes a big difference in that game.
It wouldn't work in the game, but I was just thinking when you're saying that how funny it would be to have a case like that where it comes back to haunt you later, where essentially you see that a zombified version of your former friend and you recognize it, or if it's some kind of thing like Dead Space and the thing, it's you see their face, in the monster you fight later, and it's you fucking left me there. That sort of,
Instead they come back a minute later in a closet. Exactly.
Because, yeah, it's no and rightfully so, because who wants to yeah, man, if I wait an hour I get to come back as a zombie and get killed again.
Exactly.
It's just not going to work that way. So, on that note, this is where we have.
Do we have sponsors? Is it time for a commercial break? Do we have that yet?
Are we going to keep going, or are we done? Do you guys want to keep going?
Know.
It's been well, since we got on this Skype thing, it's been an hour and 40 minutes.
Damn.
Yeah, but it's been we've recorded for an hour and 13 minutes.
I say we're.
So we
I say
still
we'll let.
Yeah, I mean we could either do what you've been consuming segment, or we could say, hey, we gave the listeners a lot and wrap it. It's your call, Sean.
think
You're the
that's-
host.
I think that's all they deserve.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
Just playing now. If you guys want to go on, then we can go on. So it's up to you guys too. I'm just gonna pass the buck. See how I did that.
Isn't the first segment, wasn't it like one big what you've been consuming? Because people were reading
That's
the book
what
and
my impression was.
eating stuff up on the internet.
Do you think
What-
there's anyone listening right now going, "Keep going"?
You're right.
No.
On that note, we done.